You know, I really hate to say it, but Nerf used to be freaking amazing. Look at all the stuff I have behind me. I'm obviously a massive fan of these plastic foam dart shooters, and yet modern Nerf is a freaking joke, a shell of its former sense with almost absolutely no redeeming value now whatsoever. I know that's gonna ruffle some feathers of some people, but I was walking through the local Goodwill and found a blaster that I apparently have never actually dedicated a solo video to on this channel besides doing a modification to one back in the day. And I think it's time we give one of the best shotguns, if not the best shotgun that Nerf has ever made, a spot in the limelight, because the Zombie Strike Sledgefire, well, it's probably better than you remember it. When I was a wee lad, having a high-end graphic strategic turn-based RPG that I could play on my mobile phone or PC was something I could only dream of. But thanks to Raid Shadow Legends, that's no longer just a fantasy, and with over 600 champions for you to collect and choose from, you're gonna be busy for quite some time. Like Skytouch Shaman from the Barbarian clan, who hurts herself every turn but then heals the rest of your team, and then removes and blocks debuffs to stall out the opponent, making her exceptionally annoying in the PvP arena. How about Glazea Soul Guide in the Sacred Order? Also known as the Ice Queen, Glazea is all about freezing her enemies, whether it's one at a time with her default attack, or by using her third skill to freeze the entire enemy team. And her passive ability prevents enemies from increasing the cooldowns of your team's abilities, and then freezes them. But don't forget about Venus. And I swear, there's no arbitrary thought process to the champions which I chose for this segment, so don't judge me. Venus is actually really versatile, allowing her to pull off moves that land debuffs like poison, decreased defense, weaken, and even HP burn, making her perform well in just about every aspect of Raid. If you pair her with Cupidus, she'll even remove all debuffs from your team and has a chance to give you an extra turn. The best part about Raid to me, each one of these champions can be customized with a variety of artifacts that raise different stats, can even add new abilities via set bonuses. Add in the 3 mastery trees per character where you can add even more stats and abilities for over 600 champions, and the possibilities are endless. And this month, Raid is adding even more new champions, updating the Tag Arena, and has a full schedule of events and tournaments for you to complete and compete. You can even check out the new Deliana Chase event where you can get this brand new legendary champion just by logging in. All you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and July 20th to score the legendary Deliana, one of the strongest support champions in the entire game, so don't miss out. Not good enough? Well, for those of you who are new to Raid Shadow Legends, scan the QR code on screen right now or use my link in the description to get yourself 3 free champions: Miserycord, Tiger Soul, and Romero. Not to mention 10 of each of the Magic XP Brew, Force XP Brew, and Spirit XP Brews to help power level your champions. But let's not stop there. Make sure you use promo code MyDeliana and get your fingers on 50 XP brews to level Deliana to level 50 instantly, as well as a ton of silver. Thanks again to Raid for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you in game. Welcome to Tag Back, the show where we take a look at a blaster from the past, see what it can offer us today in the present. And this time, it's the ever-lovable NERF Zombie Strike Sledgefire, circa 2013. You know, back when Nerf actually used to be good, right off the heels of the launch of NERF Elite, the series that, in my opinion, made Nerf way more than just casual foam flinging fun. And right after that, NERF Zombie Strike came out, and it launched with 2 incredible blasters. The Hammershot, which many of you are a huge fan of out there, and right next to it on the shelves, for a little under $30 at Toys R Us, was the freaking NERF Zombie Strike Sledgefire. The funniest part about this thing is not only was it an awesome blaster when it came out, that I, for some reason, remember it not being as good as it really is right here in the stock form of the one that I at least thrifted for $8 that included the shells, which is mind-blowing to me because these things get lost all the time. But even if you find a Sledgefire for a reasonable price that doesn't have the shells, you should still probably pick it up, especially if you've never played with one before, because you don't actually have to have the shells. We'll talk about that later on in the video. But Nerf has really not made anything else like it since then. It's kind of weird because it came with a shell, the Sledgefire shell, that you can tell by the name. It's the shell for the Sledgefire, and the Sledgefire is the only blaster that ever used this shell. And as far as I know, there was no way to buy them a la carte except for Hasbro's website many years after the blaster came out. I swear it was like 2016, 2017 when Hasbro started selling these things in limited quantity on their website, and then they disappeared forever. And then we got the Trilogy. The Trilogy had its own shell. This is not a very good shell. It works, but there's a fundamental difference between the two that makes the Sledgefire shell very good for its stock foam munition shell and the Trilogy shell very, very bad. For example, you see these notches down here at the bottom where the Trilogy would kind of grab onto the shell? Well, right above these notches is the air release hole, which means that your functional barrel is literally like right here. Practically none of the shell. The rest of it doesn't do anything but protect the dart. And yes, I'm not even talking about just air release holes, I'm talking about the fact that the foam actually only compresses and seals for the last little bit of this shell. Sledgefire shell, about the whole bottom half of the shell is where the foam compresses and seals, and the air release holes are at the top. It's also a far thinner, more economic solution. In fact, it's obviously, I would assume, way cheaper to produce these than it was these. But the going theory in the hobby for why this thing is designed the way it is so you could put it in the Trilogy. The Trilogy is a pump action thing that holds one shell. So you prime it back and the thing opens up, you drop the shell and you prime it forward, you fire it, and then when you prime it back, it kicks out the shell for you to drop a new shell in. And that was more expensive than the Sledgefire, and not even half as good. It also looked ugly as sin. The Sledgefire, break action. This is good for a couple of reasons. The break action is how you prime the blaster, and that's a mechanical advantage. This little lever back here is only for releasing the barrel, and to prime the blaster, you crank the front of it down. I really wished this is how the Tricera Blast from the Dino Squad line worked, but it didn't. Take your shell, you drop it in there, you flip this thing up or close it with your hand if you're lame, and you point and fire it. And it works, well, you can see how big this plunger tube is. That's the front of the plunger tube, and there are air restrictors there, so if you don't have enough darts to fill up an entire shell, you can still fire 1 or 2 darts for a little bit of a performance boost, but 3 darts is where it's at. The best way to use this blaster, in my opinion, is obviously take out your shell, drop it in your stock, pull out another shell, put it in there, pull it back, fire it, prime it, and repeat. This is a really effective system for what it is. The stock actually does hold your shells in place, at least if you put them in correctly. If you put a muzzle down, it looks a lot better in my opinion, but they don't actually stick in. You can still do it, and that could technically give you a little bit of a reload speed increase, but if you have them facing upwards like this, you very easily reach out into a dump pouch and reload shells or scavenge for darts to reload them. It's a very nice little self-contained system. Even though it uses shells, which is weird, but it's one of the better shell-fed blasters that any of these companies has ever given us. And it needs to fire 3 darts, so plunger tube, pretty big. Spring is kind of more powerful than a K26 spring. The plunger rod actually goes into the entire grip of the blaster. That doesn't mean you can't get a spring replacement that turns this thing up another notch, but they're kind of few and far between. But performance is actually what we need to talk about, so let's go to the firing footage where I actually got really, really surprised with how good the Sledgefire is in 2022, especially compared to Nerf that we get nowadays.
All right, so now that we have a break in the rain and I can actually show what this thing can do, I'm actually a little surprised. So this is a thrifted, completely stock Sledgefire. And here's a shell with brand new NERF Elite darts, the one that came with the Mandalorian blaster. I'm gonna try to keep this as level as I can, but that's pretty decent. Like, I remember back in the day it was pretty disappointing, but it was probably just the bad darts at the place I was going to. The little bit of an angle even. That's over 50 feet. One of those darts almost hit 75 feet. That's actually impressive, but I'm fairly certain we can do better. So just for giggles, we're gonna try Adventure Force Waffle Darts here. These should probably not go nearly as far and probably won't have a good spread. So we'll do flat. Yeah, they're heavier darts, and they're because they're heavier, they're a bit more accurate, which means they don't fly nearly as well under the same power, which in this blaster, that's actually a huge, huge con. A little bit of an angle. Yeah, you can lob them, but it's not nearly as good. And then for giggles, I have one shell of original X-Shot darts here. And I'm gonna fire this flat again. And yeah, that was okay. With a little bit of an angle, it probably could have gone farther. Now let's actually show something cool. I have Dart Zone Max darts in here, so short darts that we know and love. And from when I was testing it inside, it was actually really surprising. So, yeah, that wasn't nearly as good as what it looked like inside, but try it again. 2 more shells of these. Another flat shot. Okay, so one of those darts nearly went. It actually hit the 50 and bounced. So, I'm guessing with an angle, we may be able to outrange the angled shots from the Elite darts. Kinda, sorta, maybe. But you gotta, again, remember that this is completely stock. The shells are stock besides having the dart post cut out. That is definitely usable. You would be happy to use that in a stock war, or maybe even like a 130 cap if you were working on something close range. That's pretty impressive. And with stock Elite darts, the one thing this thing would be good for, those are actually really good spreads. Everything else was a bit too accurate, but that's surprising for what is a very old blaster. And of course, 3D printed shells, brass shells, you can get so much more out of just the stock spring, let alone upgrading the spring. So the Sledgefire still has plenty to offer.
Yeah, and considering you can make this thing compatible for short darts by literally just cutting out the dart posts in the back of the shell, which aren't needed for anything. It's not a reversible mod, no, but it doesn't really affect your performance in any negative way. It's just way better for the blaster. You get a performance increase whether you're using full-length darts or not, but you do get the option of using half-lengths. However, while it looks like you maybe could fit 6 half-lengths in one of these shells, the effective barrels are down at the bottom of the shell, so the darts will just fall out, which is a bit of a bummer. But the Sledgefire, it's ripe for all kinds of mods. Obviously, spring replacements, that's the first thing. The second thing is barrel seal adjustments. Adding a bigger gasket right here that can really compress and make a better seal between the plunger tube and what's in front of it is really good in boosting the performance of your blaster. Better way is having a longer effective barrel to utilize the air pressure from that massive plunger tube. And one of the most common mods for the Sledgefire is to completely forego using any of the shells and just basically putting in a thing of PVC with a brass barrel or something in the middle of it and loading your darts into a barrel one at a time. But it is possible. I've seen these things hit upwards of 170 FPS, which nowadays is practically nothing. I can go to Walmart, buy a Nexus Pro, it hits the same exact thing as mag-fed pump action, only costs $50. But for just using hardware store stuff, yeah, the Sledgefire was absolutely awesome. One of the most accessible mods you can ever do. Make Test Battle has a fantastic mod guide for the Sledgefire that everybody should check out. But I don't know why Hasbro just forsake the Sledgefire. They never did anything else with the shells. They made inferior shells for the Trilogy and the Shell Strike, which is a shame because the Shell Strike would have really benefited from using Sledgefire shells. But what I'm the most mad about was there was never a double-barreled Sledgefire. If I wanted to make one, and I have tried, in fact, I have the corpse of the project somewhere, which I could dump a lot of time into, it'd be a pretty easy thing to just shave the things off the side and make it as flat as possible, glue 2 of them together, pin it at the front, pin it at the back. That way, when you break one of the barrels, you're actually priming both of them at once. You have both plunger tubes and all that kind of stuff. You can't cut the grips off because, well, the grips have internals in them, unfortunately, with the plunger rod and the spring, so not a huge problem though, because you could just move the grip even lower, which somebody has done. It's one of the first times I saw a double-barreled Sledgefire, but that makes it look pretty goofy, in my opinion. A better way is to move the grip back, pin the triggers, move it into a new grip, and voila, you have an awesome double-barreled Sledgefire. A design that would be incredibly easy for Hasbro to do, and yet they never did it. And it's a mod that I want to do, I just don't have the time or the patience to dump into it. Technically, you could say the Lightning Blitz or the Splitfire were probably better shotguns because they were air-powered, you can get more performance out of them, but they took a lot longer to reload. The Sledgefire, because they used those shells, and they were good shells, and if you really wanted to, you could brass them and stuff like that. it was an awesome thing. And if you do thrift one without the shells, you want to use shells, well, 3D printers are your best friends. Not only can you easily print better shells than these, I mean, less durable, obviously, but easily replaceable, but Sledgefire shells were one of the first 3D printed products I'd ever seen in this hobby. Laser gnomes sold for about $20 to $25 a piece, shells that were not only replacements for just the elite ones, but single shot shells, which got better performance because they had more effective tight barrel on them. But more importantly, they had ones that fired mega darts. But even just for stock Nerf battles, the Sledgefire is surprisingly competent. And since you're going to be using it mostly in close quarters anyway, it's probably always going to be somewhat of an option for you regardless of what FPS caps you're playing. I was pleasantly surprised with how good the Sledgefire still is, and if you want to get one, well, they're pretty accessible through secondhand parties, obviously like eBay and stuff like that. But if you do ever get a chance to pick one of these things up, even without the shells, I highly recommend you do because it is a lovely blaster. But that's all I've got for you. I'm Walcom S7. Thank you very much for watching this video. Chances are you got to the end when you like what I do here, so please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, ring the bell, do all that algorithmic garbage to help the channel grow so you can help the hobby grow. And of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different video.
You gotta up,